All righty. Good evening, everyone. I'll go ahead and call this May 14th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. Can I get a roll call, please?
Chair Nicole Hendricks.
Here.
Andrew Carr.
Here.
Ron Heberlein.
Here.
Matt Constantine. Sam Skull.
Here.
Yana Semenova. Here. Jennifer Willard. Here. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let's see here. So moving on to citizen input. This is the time that citizens have the opportunity to address the Planning Commission regarding any item that is not already scheduled for a formal public hearing or public work session tonight. Therefore, if any member of the audience, either here in City Hall or via Zoom, would like to speak about any other matter of concern, please raise your hand or send a message to the recorder using the Zoom chat function so that we may hear from you now. If you have not already, please fill out a testimony card and give it to the clerk. Also, please state your name and address for the record, or state that your address is provided on the testimony card. Please.
Recording in progress.
Sorry, you're good. Please come forward to the podium when you are called, or unmute yourself on Zoom when the clerk requests. Is there anyone that would like to testify at this time?
I currently have 0 attendees on Zoom.
Okay, and seeing none in the room, we will go ahead and move on to the consideration of the minutes. So we have the April 9th, 2025 minutes were previously distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, the minutes are approved as distributed. Okay, we are going to move on to our public hearing. So I'll go ahead and call to order the public hearing regarding resolution number LP 25-0001 for the Housing Our Future project at 6:05 p.m. Oh, bang that gavel again to open the hearing. Have all commissioners familiarized themselves with the application?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Yes. Great. At this time, I'll go ahead and call city staff to present the staff report, including staff's proposed recommendations along with the applicable review and approval criteria. Will the city team please present their report and recommendation?
Thank you, Chair Hendricks and Commissioners. My name is Miranda Bateshell. I'm the Planning Director. I'm sorry I'm joining you from afar this evening, but I wanted to go ahead and introduce this item and the public hearing tonight. This is a really important milestone for the city, and I'm really proud of the team and everyone who was involved for the work that went into the Housing Our Future project, resulting in the housing needs and capacity analysis, as well as the housing production strategy that is before you this evening for your consideration. As you know, the city of Wilsonville has a long history of inclusive housing planning and ensuring that we're planning for a variety of housing to meet the needs of all community members throughout the different stages of their lives as those needs change. And also in being proactive in projects that will provide homes for low-income households and some of our most vulnerable community members, like Creekside Woods, the Rain Garden, and now Vuela, all projects we're really proud of being involved with. This is the next chapter in our work, and this will set the stage for more great work in bringing homes to all of our community members in the future. So thank you, commissioners, for helping us get to this important milestone. And thank you to all of the task force members, as well as to the project team. And now it is my privilege to introduce Kim Reibold, Senior Planner with the City of Wilsonville and the Project Manager for the Housing Our Future project.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Chair Hendricks and Commissioners. I'm Kim Reibold, Senior Planner with the City, and I'm here tonight with both Beth Goodman here on my right, and then Nicole Underwood online of Echo Northwest, and we will present for your consideration the Housing Our Future project. And before we begin, I just want to highlight the items that are included within your packet, which we will discuss more in the presentation. Attachment 1 is the housing needs and capacity analysis document, which is proposed as a sub-element to the comprehensive plan. Attachment 2 is the housing production strategy, and this is a standalone strategy document that is not a part of the comprehensive plan. Attachment 3 contains proposed comprehensive plan text amendments that reflect adoption of these documents as the city's guiding documents for housing planning going forward. Attachment 4 is the findings report, and this report is the demonstration of how the housing needs and capacity analysis, as well as the proposed comprehensive plan text amendments, comply with applicable city, metro, and state policies and regulations. And then finally, attachment 5 is the public record for the Housing Our Future project. And so before I turn the presentation over to Beth, I want to kind of piggyback on what Ms. Bateshell said about Wilsonville's long history of housing planning. And particularly on this slide, we've illustrated the housing work, or the key housing work we've been doing since the adoption of the last housing needs analysis back in 2014. This includes master plans for the town center area, as well as Frog Pond West, Frog Pond East and South, development code amendments to support the middle housing across the city, the housing or equitable housing strategic plan that the city adopted in 2020 and has been our current strategic framework for housing projects, as well as others, such as the Vuelo project that Miranda mentioned. These efforts have focused on many different housing needs throughout the city and serve as the basis for this work that we've been doing in the Housing Our Future project and the actions that we've selected going forward. We are excited to continue with this work. So to tell you more about the details, I will turn it over to Beth. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here this evening. I'm going to walk through a presentation. If you have questions at any point, please, of course, stop me. I'll also mention that my voice is a little bit undependable this evening, so I apologize if I start coughing. So what you've got here is the housing needs and capacity analysis and housing production strategy. Taken together, they help you answer questions about how much growth are you expecting over the next 20 years. Where is your land that is buildable? What are the characteristics of your buildable land? Do you have enough buildable land to accommodate expected growth? And then what policies do you need to meet the housing needs that are broader than just things around land use? On the next slide. So this tells you about what's in the different parts of the project, the two different reports. They both include a lot of information about demographics and housing markets, whereas the housing needs and capacity analysis focuses on buildable land, and the housing production strategy really focuses on the actions that are necessary to support development of housing in Wilsonville in the next 6 years. So on the next slide, please. So we've done a lot of engagement throughout this project, starting back in 2023. You can see that we have done things like been at your annual block party, done some public meetings, a survey or two throughout this, stakeholder interviews, conversations specifically with the Latino network, for instance, about how to implement some of the actions in the housing production strategies. We worked with a conversation guide and trying to get a little bit more wider set of engagement going. And then more recently, we did an open house. So throughout all of these, we've been gathering information about the types of issues that are in Wilsonville and the types of issues that are not in Wilsonville and why they're not in Wilsonville. In other words, people who are unable to access housing in Wilsonville, those kind of things. And those are really folded into and throughout the housing production strategy, especially. On the next slide, please. So to start with land, on the next slide. So here's your buildable lands inventory. Most of your buildable land is, of course, in the residential neighborhood designations, so around Frog Pond, especially east and south. You've got some other buildable land scattered throughout town, especially a little bit of higher density land in your south areas. Overall, you've got about 269 acres of buildable lands. Most of that is in the Frog Pond areas. So that's not necessarily surprising to you all. You know that you basically, since your last study, Villebois had completely built out and starting these other development areas that you've been planning for. So on the next slide, please. So when we take a look at how much growth you're expected, and this is based on Metro's forecast, we're looking at about 2,815 new units over the next 20 years. You've got capacity for about 3,600 new units on your existing land base. So what that tells us is that you've got a little more capacity than you need. So if you grow a little bit faster, you can accommodate that growth. One thing to note is that a lot of the capacity for multifamily housing is in town center. And so your ability to accommodate multifamily growth will depend in part on redevelopment of town center. You might think, well, what if that doesn't happen? Well, you'll be revisiting this issue in another 6 years, so you'll have a much better idea by then of what's happening with town center and what's not happening with town center, and what the issues are and what the city can and does do to support that redevelopment. So again, you've got a little surplus of capacity. It's mostly for single unit and missing middle housing types. Please go ahead. So like I said, you've got enough land. You need to continue to plan for a variety of housing types to meet your changing demographics in Wilsonville and people who may move here from across the region, along with their demographic concerns. We're looking at more townhouses in the future, for instance, and fewer single-family detached houses than you've seen in the past. So a little bit of shift in some of the types of housing, but very similar to what you've been seeing in the last few years. The next slide, please. Well, before I go on to the next slide, are there any questions about the housing needs and capacity analysis? Okay. All right, so your housing production strategy on this slide. So here what we've given you is a model of housing affordability at different income levels. This assumes a household of 4 with 100% of median family income at about $116,900. That's for the Portland metro region. That household can afford about $2,900 a month in housing costs, or a unit that costs up to $380,000 approximately. Well, your median sales price of housing was $585,000, so considerably above what your average income could afford. But when we look at your average monthly rents, about $2,000, including some basic utilities, the median household, the household with the median household income can afford that. But as you're thinking about newly built housing, households that earn less than 60% of median family income, newly built housing is typically income restricted housing. So it's got federal and state funds that support development of that housing. In other words, the housing market on its own, the private market, doesn't generally build housing that's affordable in that income range. So between 60 and 120% of median family income, the market is starting to be able to, especially in the upper income ranges of that, build housing that is newly built and affordable, a lot of the time for rental housing. So going on to the next slide. When we look at the structure of Wilsonville's population, what we see is about 75% of your households have income below 120% of median family income. And that's really the focus of the housing production strategy. So when we think about what needs to change and what can the city do to support that change for building more housing in those areas and those income ranges, it's for this area below 120%. And a lot of the time it's for housing that's affordable at less than 80% of median family income. So that's really a focus of the HPS. If you go on to the next slide. All right, so this one, I feel like the fonts are really tiny on this. This one we've attempted to start to talk about the kinds of housing that are affordable in these different income ranges. So you can see that your market rate multifamily housing Really, it starts to be affordable around 80% of median family income. But some of your older housing, of course, that is multifamily would be affordable below that. When you look at small lot, single family, large lot, single family, that tends to be in the upper ranges of income. Things like townhouses and condos and some of your middle housing types would be affordable in that 80 to 120% of median family income. So that gives you a little bit of sense. Pardon me. Please go on. So as we think about affordability, one of the main measures of affordability is households that spend 30% or more of their income, their gross income on housing, are considered cost burdened. Households that spend 50% or more of their income on housing are considered severely cost burdened. So about 55% of your renter households are cost burdened, and 30% of them, 29%, are severely cost burdened. You see cost burden that's lower among owners, and that's often makes sense because it's hard to get home loans if you can't afford the housing. As we're thinking about different groups who have difficulty affording housing, part of what we're looking at are these cost burden statistics. So this is true across the entire region. We're seeing patterns about like this. Wilsonville is not unique in that necessarily. So on the next slide. So part of what we did in the housing production strategy is have a lot of discussion with different groups of people, sometimes talking to service providers about different housing needs. And I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to hit on a few of them. So your Latino population looks at need for larger housing for extended multi-generational families. Of course, that housing has to be affordable to them. People with disabilities looking at housing that is accessible for them, so physically accessible and otherwise accessible. People experiencing homelessness need housing that often includes services like mental health or substance abuse services. Seniors, often their housing types are similar, housing needs are similar to people with disabilities because seniors disproportionately have disabilities, but also your senior households are more likely to be smaller households, so 1 or 2 person households. And then of course, low and middle income workers and students, their issues are oftentimes really about affordability and finding housing in places that they can afford. On the next slide. All right, so the actions in the HPS. So I think we've talked about this slide quite a bit, and I won't go over it too much, but essentially, as we're thinking about what actions the city might take, we're also thinking about the city's role in housing development. You all don't generally develop housing at cities, so what you can influence is often public policy, availability of land, and availability of infrastructure, with a little bit of ability to influence market feasibility through things like property tax exemptions, that kind of thing. So this is partially framing how we're thinking about actions. On the next slide, please. So what has Wilsonville been doing? As you would think from the first slide that Kim talked through, you've been doing a lot. Your monitoring of development activity, your annual monitoring reports, I think, document that well. Just hitting a few of the high points, what you've done with the Valua project with land distribution to get affordable housing built that has services, permanently supportive housing that has services to help people stay in their housing is really important. You've long had the nonprofit corporate low-income tax exemption, SDC deferrals or FDC waivers, depending on the housing types, accessibility requirements in Frog Pond, and other sorts of things. So you've been doing a lot. On the next slide. So when we think about all of the actions and what actions should be in the HPS, part of what we're thinking about is what are the requirements of the HPS. And one of the key requirements is taken together, do the actions in the HPS, help the city achieve more fair and equitable housing outcomes on these different areas. So for affordable housing, increasing housing stability, housing options for people experiencing homelessness, location of housing in compact mixed-use areas where greenhouse gas emissions could be lower, increasing housing choice in affordable and safe neighborhoods with high-quality amenity, especially for people in state and federal protected classes, and then increasing fair housing and access to fair housing, especially for those same state and federal protected classes. Next slide. So in addition to those considerations, we're also thinking about these considerations when selecting the HPS. So to a certain degree, you need to address housing need for the 20-year period in the HNCA, but the actions are going to be implemented over this next 6-year period, so 2026 through 2032, if I'm doing my math right. So what can you do in that 6-year period? In adopting your housing protection strategy with the actions in it, you're essentially saying you're going to make a good faith effort to implement those actions in the context of the funding that you have available and the staff capacity that you have available. So in the context of the resources you have, it may well be that, you have resources in the future that are a little different than you have now through changes that the legislature, say, makes or other programs. So remember that you can still explore actions that aren't in the HPS. You can explore those during your HPS period, and you may have an opportunity to swap in some actions in the HPS at your midpoint review. So, all right, so your actions. I feel like this is almost like looking at the sun here, this little rays of sun off to the side. So in the HPS, we have about 7 different recommended actions. The planning work program actions are primarily about things that your planning staff can do. Many of these will be things that come in front of you for implementation. So on any of these actions, you can consider them a project in amongst themselves. So they'll have a public outreach. Most of these will have, I think, a public hearing or at least public discussions with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So that's what you've got in the first column. In the Foundations for Actions for the Future, we've got an action about looking at scoping out what you would need for a housing specialist, so a staff person who would help execute on the future housing programs, things like your rental inspection program, community land trust, et cetera. These are things that your existing staff don't have capacity to do. We heard a lot of desire to have all of those actions in the future housing program in the HPS. Right now, they're identified as things that you might do if you have capacity and resources to do them in this 6-year period, but certainly revisiting them at your next HPS. And then also establishing a funding source. One of those funding sources might be something like a construction excise tax or other dedicated funding source to support housing development. On the next slide. We've got your implementation schedule starting in 2026. You have to have your housing production actions completed by 2031. You might say, we want to do all of these in 2026. Well, you have to think about the capacity of staff and the fact that a lot of these are going to take some time to think about. What you're committing to with this is that you're going to look at having council action or council decision in the years that we've identified there. If you adopt it early, there's no penalty. You're allowed to do it early. There is potential consequences for not doing it by the time you say you're going to do it at your midpoint review, which should be in 2029, early 2029. And so I'm going to hand this to Kim.
All right, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the attachments is a comprehensive plan text amendment that goes along with this. And these are really just some limited edits to the residential development section of the comprehensive plan, reflecting the role that these 2 documents will play in the city's housing planning. Likewise, there are some tables in the upfront sections of the comprehensive plan where different supporting documents are listed, and there will be edits to that section that reflect the adoption of the HNCA as a sub-element of the comprehensive plan, replacing the 2014 Wilsonville residential land study. In terms of public comment, no public comment has been received as part of the hearing process for the Housing Our Future project. We do have some public comment that has been received over the course of the project, and that, along with the other public feedback, is included in the record attachment to the staff report. So with that, the staff recommendation is that Planning Commission approve Resolution LP 25-0001, recommending to City Council adoption of the HNCA, HPS, and the related comprehensive plan text amendments. And with that, if you have any additional questions, we are happy to take those at this time. Thank you.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions at this time? I think there's going to be additional opportunity to ask questions following any public testimony as well. Yeah, go for it, Commissioner Semenova.
Thank you. I looked through the metrics tables, and one of the things that I was curious about is how are we measuring the success of the strategy down the road? Are those like more granular metrics? I imagine will be reviewed annually. Will they be established then at a later point in time? As in, like, you know, say we need 3,000 dwellings of these types by these dates, like, and this is what we're forecasting. And then as years go by, checking in of where we're at. Is that something that's going to come down later on?
Yeah, so I'll start the answer to that. So at this point, the city doesn't have a target for the number of units affordable at specific income levels. In Chapter 2 of the Housing Production Strategy, in Exhibit 8, we do list the amounts of housing that is needed over the 20-year period and the 6-year period. So for instance, when we look at households with income of between 60 and 80% of MFI, we're looking at about 308 new households over the 20-year period and 90 new households over the 6-year period. So you could take that as, that is certainly a target. The city gets to hold itself to this target as it wants to. You're not held to that target by the state. When you're looking at housing that's affordable at, say, less than 60% of MFI, you're looking at about 350 new units that are affordable in that income range. And so when you're looking at the monitoring program, which is, I think, what you maybe were referring to, okay, there's essentially those are suggested monitoring indicators that the city could add to its existing monitoring program where they are missing. I'm sure that there's something that as you're doing this work, you'll be like, yeah, we should also be tracking this other thing. And so you would be tracking those other things. So to answer your question, you don't have specific goals, but certainly monitoring development of housing, especially in the less than 80% of MFI range, and monitoring different types of housing is going to help you understand where it is you're going, and then also give you additional information to bring back to your next housing capacity analysis.
And I would just add for the record that the monitoring by strategy is Exhibit 18 of the housing production strategy. And so that is information we can start collecting and including in annual housing reports to keep track of things. I would also note, just in terms of unit production and affordability, with the newest iteration of this process, so next time we go through this, the state has established some tools, some targets, what they're calling. So they are tracking overall production as well as production of some of these subsidized housing units. And so they've created a dashboard. So that is also another mechanism that's tracking and by city and the state, you know, how many units are coming online each year. We haven't needed to incorporate that into this work, but that will also be a part of the work going forward next time we do this. So.
And that housing dashboard will compare Wilsonville to its peer cities and what's going on in the region. So, in terms of, percent of expected units produced, that kind of thing. The information is just not sensible right now because there haven't been targets. So, but you do get to see how are you doing in relation to the region and your peer cities.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I think this is we're probably not approving yet, but this is a phenomenal recommendation and reports and strategy. I just want to make sure that we have good measures of success throughout execution and ensuring that it is, how do we check that it's working in terms of just data? So thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Heffernan?
Yeah, one question on both the housing needs capacity analysis and the housing production survey. In the acknowledgement section, this is going to be a really technical question today. Is the intent to document the Planning Commission in its current state and assignments, include the former planning commissioners that were involved in this? What's the thought process? Because I look at the city council and it looks like it captures current state and previous council members that were involved in this process, but the Planning Commission isn't quite doing that.
So I think I know there have not been any changes in this past year, but certainly if we've missed somebody from the beginning part, we do typically document any member that has been a part of the process since the project started. So we can go back and double check that.
Okay. Yeah, and then our chair is incorrect. Our vice chair is still correct.
Good catch. Thank you. We will make that correction.
Okay.
It's a little less embarrassing than spelling your name wrong.
Oh, I didn't even look at that.
Oh, I totally looked at that.
Any other questions from the commission? Yeah, Commissioner Skoll.
Can we go back to the actions?
Yep.
It's just a quick question on the actions. There you go. The planning, the work program actions or the formal actions that you have in the package and it's scheduled, per year and everything. But the future, there's 4 over there on the future side to the right. Is there intent to implement those or act on those at some time in the future? Or is that to the, to the wishes of the Planning Commission or the City Council?
So what we heard through this process, so essentially the short answer is, as a part of this framework and this action plan, these are not in the implementation schedule. But I think it's important to note that these actions are reflected in this document for a reason. And that is because the task force, Planning Commission, and City Council specifically saw these as actions that they really valued and thought would be important in the future. And so the intention in actually documenting these in this document is because we wanted to carry them forward and highlight their importance. I will note that in City Council's recent goal setting, they've actually adopted a council goal around a rental housing inspection program. It's a little more, we've had conversations in this process about kind of the wording and the specificity of the wording and what's actionable and, part of this process. So I think some of the wording they've used in that goal is more exploratory. And so, the great thing about that is if we do end up going down a road where that council goal does get implemented, we will have an opportunity at the midpoint check-in, if we are working towards that, to actually bring that into the strategy document. But it's just that we are not tied to a timeline. We are not tied to reporting back to the state on the progress of this. And so what I think is that kind of like what we did when we started this work, and we went back to the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan and took stock of strategies that we maybe hadn't gotten to yet and used those and brought them in as a starting point. I would suspect that the next time we do this work, that if any of these strategies on the right side of this list have not been begun on yet, those would, be brought in and prioritized as part of that process. But as we've noted, they are in many ways contingent upon identifying funding sources and technical expertise.
Right. Yeah, there's a couple there that I think are very important that are kind of outside that. the primaries and everything, and it's good that we keep those in the windshield. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? None? Yeah, I think my only question was, I think I had heard, like the potential to swap out actions. So that's what you were just talking about, is potentially those future ones. At the mid-year check-in, we could have that opportunity for those ones specifically. Okay, great. And then for that mid-year or midpoint, thank you, report to the state, do we already know what kind of reporting they're looking for, like how in-depth it is? And the reason I ask is because the timeline, the way it's scheduled, like we also have 3 actions that we're hoping to like implement that year, and is it the same team developing the report? That it just seems like there's a lot going on in that 1 year, so I just want to keep that in mind, that the team has enough capacity to stay on track with the timeline and do that report. And yeah.
That's a very, very good point. So Wilsonville is very smart and has an existing monitoring program, so you won't be spinning up a whole new monitoring program. And so what I expect DLCD is going to, start with is we'd like to see monitoring of each of these actions and what's been going on, et cetera, with them. But DLCD, I don't think, has put together the exact contents of a midpoint review. They've only recently adopted some HPSs. There's a number of them ahead of you, including in the metro region. So you'll get to see them going to their midpoint review before y'all do.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing there's no more questions, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next portion of the public hearing, which will provide an opportunity for the Planning Commission to hear testimony from audience members. We will take public testimony in the following order: those present in person at City Hall, then those participating remotely via teleconference, and finally reading any email testimony into the record. And then to submit testimony via email, you can use the following email address, which is planning@wilsonvilleoregon.gov. And please note, any written testimony received after the public hearing has closed cannot be considered. And then, as you are given an opportunity to testify either in person or via Zoom, please state your name and address, or state that your address is provided on the testimony card, and then present any testimony to the Planning Commission regarding the matter before us. Please do your best to speak clearly and directly into the microphone so other participants are sure to hear your comments. After each participant's testimony, I will ask the Planning Commission if they have any questions for the speaker. Before I call to testimony from the audience, is there any member of the audience at City Hall who wishes to testify, who has not yet filled out a testimony card? If so, please fill out a card now and give the card to the clerk. Sorry, it's always odd to read this when there's no audience members in the room. But, so I'm going to pause here, and I don't see any audience members, so I'm assuming we didn't get any cards.
No cards and no attendees online.
Okay, great. So hearing that there's no attendings on Zoom, go ahead and move on. Oh, let me just read this really quick. To ensure remote participants have an opportunity to testify and are not prevented to do so by technical issues. Okay, city staff will now confirm individually with each remote participant, which we do not have. Okay, thank you. I'll confirm with city staff if there's any testimony that was submitted via email. It sounds like I heard no on the presentation, but if we did, please read those into the record at this time. Can we just confirm we haven't received? Okay, hearing none. Do commissioners have any additional questions of the audience? I guess that's no. Do commissioners have any additional questions for staff based on testimony, which we haven't heard, so we're going to keep moving along. And now we're going to move into what, if any, discussion does any commissioner wish to have to help ensure they have gathered all the information they need to make a decision. This is different than the discussion we will have to deliberate once a motion is made. And discussion at this point should focus on ensuring understanding of the facts presented and clarifying particular points rather than expressing conclusions, which we'll do in a few minutes. Yeah, Commissioner Heberlein.
So, Ms. Geil Heineman, given that the acknowledgements need to change in attachment 1 and 2, when a person was going to make a motion, we would need to include some details around the expected changes to the acknowledgements in attachment 1 and 2.
You got it.
All right, I'll work on it. Yeah.
Okay, good point. Thank you. No other clarifying questions? Okay. Hearing no further discussion, I'm prepared to close the hearing. Once the hearing is closed, there cannot be any other discussion, comment, or questions pertaining to the material matters of the case file except among commissioners. However, the commission may ask staff specific clarifying procedural questions. Please confirm there is no additional discussion needed at this point and no further questions of staff or any party as to the issues presented to the commission. Again, seeing none, I'll declare this public hearing closed at 6:43 p.m. And then with the public hearing closed, it is time for us to entertain a motion to deliberate and make a decision on the resolution before us. If a commissioner wishes to amend the staff report in any way, it should be included in the motion. It sounds like Commissioner Heberlein might be working on a motion. So do I have a motion on resolution number LP 250001? And I'll give you a second if you'd like to work on that a little bit longer.
Okay, I think I got it. I move to approve resolution LP 25-0001, recommending to City Council adoption of the housing needs capacity analysis, housing production strategy, and related comprehensive plan text amendments, including updates to the acknowledgements in attachment 1 and 2 to update the Planning Commission chair and add any additional former commissioners that were not included.
I'm trying to write it out so I can repeat it. Do I have a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. So I'll go ahead and, it's been moved and, do I have to repeat?
Paula, do you have all of that or do you need it repeated? Okay, then you're good.
Thank you. I tried to type as fast as I could, but I think it's just, he said it great. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any discussion about the motion? Commissioner
I
Carr.
would just like to make a comment. The effort that went into this from staff, consultants, commission, city council, just about, I don't know how many people would be involved, has been tremendous. And the effort goes into what we want to see and envision for our city in 20 years. It's hard to throw a dart 20 years into the future. And so I think that's why we've got steps along the way where we're going to validate what we're doing and potentially make alterations to that. But I think the effort that's been put forth is enlightening to me and also gives me hope for the future that we will have a planned city, not one that's built willy-nilly, but one that's been planned and effectively done in that type of fashion. So thank you all.
Thanks. Other commissioners have comments? Commissioner Skoll?
I would add to Commissioner Kerr's statement, was fortunate to sit in a couple of the meetings. I think the information that's provided and the information that was prepared is really good, and it does give us a direction to move into the future, and would like to thank the team who put it together. You guys did a great job. Thank you very much.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll just echo what's been said. I guess thank you to Echo Northwest. I didn't. Really appreciate your presentations are really great, and those visuals, especially the housing affordability and compared to income levels, is always just like that comes to mind when I think about and talk about with people about our housing needs. And I'm really excited to see and be involved in the action implementation moving forward. And like what was said earlier, there's already been a lot of good work happening, so this just continues that effort, and thank you so much for everything.
Well, and your staff has really done great staff work on this.
Yes, yes. Go Wilsonville team. Okay, seeing no more discussion, I'll go ahead and call the question of all in favor. Say aye.
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 And then all opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Cool. All right.
Thank you.
That wraps it up. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we are going to transition to the next agenda item, which is a work session on the Wilsonville Industrial Land Readiness project. This work session is a chance for Planning Commission to gain additional understanding of and provide guidance on ongoing legislative projects prior to a public hearing. As a courtesy, the Planning Commission will, as time permits, allow for limited public comment on the topic after staff have presented their report for the Commission's purpose of continuing to understand the project. It should be noted that this is not a public hearing, and any participants are encouraged to participate in a future public hearing for legal standing purposes. At this time, I'll go ahead and bring the city team forward to present the information they have prepared for the work session.
And Chair, before we jump in, I just want to say I've been given permission by the planning manager, since I had a night meeting last night, to leave after our public hearing.
Good.
So I am bowing out, but don't take any offense by it.
Okay,
It's just
great.
from having a meeting last night.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, enjoy your evening. Yeah, keeping us in line.
And thanks for asking a question, so I had use.
You're welcome.
All right, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to the team to give the presentation.
Good evening, Chair Hendricks and Commissioners. My name is Cindy Luxhoy, Associate Planner, and I am joined by Jan Pauley for this work session item. Tonight, we are looking for your input on the proposed craft industrial zone, which is a new zoning district intended to reflect the unique characteristics of the craft industrial land use identified in the Basalt Creek Concept Plan. While it's tailored for that area, it could also be applied in other parts of the city where similar uses might be appropriate. Okay. On the left side of this slide, you will see a map excerpt showing the area designated for craft industrial land use in the Basalt Creek Concept Plan. It is highlighted in turquoise. This area is located west of Southwest Boones Ferry Road and sits just south of the planned extension of the Basalt Creek Parkway. On the right, the aerial photo outlines the craft industrial area in yellow, with the potentially developable portion shaded in light yellow. You'll also notice the Basalt Creek Canyon on the western side of the area, which is planned to become part of the significant resource overlay zone. The area includes 8 properties ranging in size from about half an acre to 8 acres, with an average size of around 5 acres. The properties are arranged in a long east-west configuration. This slide gives you a closer look at the existing residential development located in the eastern portion of the craft industrial area. While the area was originally intended for industrial use, consistent with the purpose for which it was brought into the urban growth boundary, the city recognized that traditional industrial development might not be a good fit for these properties due to various constraints. At the same time, there was an opportunity to allow more flexibility and better align with the existing residential character of the area, as the area evolves. As a result, the area was designated as an employment transition area and assigned the craft industrial land use type. In the early phase of development, we expect many of the existing homes to remain, with some business activity likely occurring in garages, converted portions of homes, or accessory structures. Looking further ahead, perhaps 10 to 20 years, we anticipate a shift toward purpose-built structures that support a mix of craft industries, maker spaces, and other complementary employment uses. While the market will ultimately shape the pace of this transition, the zoning needs to be flexible enough to support both the current and future phases of development. This slide shows some examples of what we might see during the early phase of development in the craft industrial area. In this phase, we expect to see existing residential properties adapted for small-scale business use. This could include home-based businesses and cottage industries operating out of accessory structures like art or production studios, maker spaces, shop spaces, or even small event venues. Potential uses might include food-related micro-businesses, custom sign making, artisan or specialty goods production, or digital printing. As these craft industrial uses take root, some properties may gradually transition into live-work or business-integrated dwelling units over time. We don't anticipate lot consolidation into larger parcels during this early phase. In fact, this phase of adaptation may continue for quite a while, especially in the northern part of the craft industrial area due to limited developable land and natural resource constraints. Larger scale redevelopment likely will not occur until that lot consolidation becomes feasible. That said, it's also possible that early phase adaptations and later phase redevelopment could coexist indefinitely, depending on how land ownership and development patterns evolve over time. During the concept planning process, the Hood River waterfront and parts of southeast Portland were identified as strong examples of what the craft industrial typology could look like in its later phase of redevelopment. The images on this slide highlight examples from southeast Portland, specifically the area between OMSI and Ladd's Addition. This neighborhood blends residential uses with a variety of craft industrial and maker spaces, many of which are housed in repurposed or converted buildings. It's a great illustration of how these uses can coexist and evolve over time in a flexible mixed-use environment. This slide shows some examples of development in the Hood River waterfront overlay zone. In this area, you'll find 2- and 3-story buildings that typically feature craft industrial uses on the ground floor with live workspaces and residential units above. The district is located next to parks, natural areas, and other industrial uses, creating a unique blend of activity and environment. Hood River was seen as a strong model during the Basalt Creek concept planning process because of its thoughtful approach to development. Hood River prioritized creating an attractive, pedestrian-friendly streetscape, improving local access, and protecting public access to trails and natural areas, all while supporting new industrial and commercial growth that aligns with the character of the area. While some uses in Wilsonville's planned development industrial zone may be appropriate for the craft industrial land use type as the area transitions to more urban industrial uses in the future, the PDI zone lacks the flexibility needed to realize the concept plan vision for this unique area of Basalt Creek. Therefore, staff is recommending amending the city's development code to establish the new craft industrial zone. That said, we'd like to focus in on potential language for the purpose statement of the new CI zone. This slide highlights key elements and the full statement is included in attachment 4 of the staff report. As a reminder, while the new CI zone is tailored to Basalt Creek, it could also be applied in other parts of the city with similar features, such as limited space for new development, existing buildings, and in areas that need a smooth transition between industrial and other land uses. This slide shows a partial list of potential uses in the proposed craft industrial zone. The full list can also be found in attachment 4 of the staff report. The range of uses is intentionally broad, starting with small-scale home businesses and cottage industries and extending to craft and specialty manufacturing, as well as industrial office and laboratory use. The zone also allows for limited residential options, such as live, work, and business integrated dwelling units, along with select retail service and service commercial uses that support the area's employment focus. That concludes my short presentation for tonight. And at this point, we're looking for the Planning Commission's input on how best to achieve the intended vision for the craft industrial area, guided by the questions shown on this slide. Thank you for your time and your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so what questions do we have for the city team or comments? What comments or discussion would you like to have at this time? Commissioner Willard?
I'll
Yeah.
kick it off. Through our discussions, I've become quite in favor of the craft industrial area. I think it's a great bridging, when you look to see what it's zoned in Tualatin versus further south, it's a great use of that space, and considering what's there now. I just wanted to clarify one thing. Zoning this does not prevent it from being used residentially as it is right now, or even if those properties sell, they can still be used exclusively residentially. Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, correct.
Seeing your head
So
nod.
the zoning wouldn't be applied until the point at which they annex to the city.
Okay.
And until they do, they're still going to continue in that FD20 zone in
Okay.
Washington County.
Okay. The only other comment to answering your second question is if there should be any uses that should be removed or added. And the only one I could think of, I think the list captures what we envision quite nicely. I was thinking about the area, I can't remember the name of it, but where we have the contractor uses. And do we want to specifically exclude contractor use in this craft industrial? Contractor use isn't the right term. I forget what you called it, but facilities, contractors' facilities, I think, maybe?
Yeah, contractor establishments.
That's right, that's the one.
That can be explored. What initially comes to mind is there may be some appropriate for a very small contractor, and maybe some limitations, particularly in a mixed area like this. We may want to look at limitations of outdoor storage that are different than like a PDI zone, for example. So think kind of balancing that flexibility of use while making sure we have strategic performance standards that prevent undesired portions of use, right? So if you can't use it for a lay down yard, then you're not. But if you're running your a small landscaping company, and you happen to have, a couple trailers in the back or something, and your little office, that's probably fine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and also by virtue of it's essentially not allowed, since it's not, contractors' establishments are not in the list of permitted uses.
It would have to be an exception.
Correct, right? So,
Maybe something to clarify.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Heberlein.
Yeah, I guess just a follow-on to that, but the list is potential uses. It's not an all-inclusive list of these are the only things that can be developed in this area, correct? Because potential is, here's some things that could be, not here are the only things that can be.
Well, when it becomes a zone, it would be just like any other zone that we have. So we've put together this potential list of uses.
Yeah.
But when that gets, when we take, at the point at which we take this and we turn it into code amendments to the development code, at that point, then these will be the list of allowed uses within the zone.
Yeah, the word potential is just for discussion purposes. When it's actually put into code, it'll be, this is the list, just like any other zone.
Okay. I hear you. Okay, I'm gonna have to think more about the list. The challenge that I have with a list like this is while it is generally vague in some of them, there is also some very specific things listed in here, which makes it hard to account for future growth of technologies and things that may come about. So I guess I'm just a little nervous that we're going to have a list that says you can only do these 12 things, and then the 13th things comes up and is really cool, but now we've got to go through a variance process to have that.
Or we can do
allowed
as we do
use.
in the PDI and have language, other similar uses.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, because we do, and I think that's a valid point. And, in retrospect, probably something we can refine a bit more is make sure we're consistent with the level of specificity and the list of
Yeah.
uses.
Yeah, that would be helpful. And then, okay, the feedback around any uses, the only two that I'm questioning, and maybe one more than the other, is professional services and then retail and service commercial uses. And I guess on the retail and service commercial uses, what's the intent there? What's the thought process of what kind of retail and service commercial uses are we thinking about? Is this a McDonald's? Is this a office supply store that would support the craft industrial businesses around it? What's the thought process there? And I guess kind of a similar question around the professional services. Is the thought that those would be services that would support the people that are working in the area, or anybody within the city or greater metro area?
So one, those are a carryover from what we have in other industrial areas of the city where we limit the amount of professional services and retail and service commercial to that 5,000 square foot per building.
Okay.
I think maybe the reason why that we included these this way rather than doing it like we have in the PDI, where it says, uses allowed within PDC with the following limitations, is that I'm not really sure why we did it that way, to be quite honest.
Sure.
But we do want to have opportunity for a property owner to offer, retail and service that is of that smaller scale. We're not looking for like a huge,
Sure.
some kind of.
Okay, so it's
fast
more
food
the
joint or
intent
something.
of the size of the establishment, not the limitation around the type or expectation around the type of establishment.
Right.
Just a physical size
that would be
limitation.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why this list is different, is because it is limited in footprint quite substantially. And really, the notion we were thinking about is this is a fairly inclusive zoning district, and we didn't see, and when we're thinking what to exclude, we really want to look at things that may, not be compatible in the zone, or may, create demand in the zone that would kind of remove land from the inventory for other uses that it's intended for. And so from that perspective, these small scale kind of commercial establishments would fit, and we wouldn't expect them to take up a lot of the land. Also, there is opportunity for them to serve the nearby commercial areas, and it may be better, right, long-term, if you need a small lunch spot or something, to have that there in the craft industrial than taking up land, prime industrial land across the street as a portion of the larger thing. So the larger chunk of land. Let me get my thoughts back on the right track. Give me a moment.
I think I'm okay with the answer so far.
I had a good point. I just can't remember it now.
Commissioner Heberlein, if I may, can you guys hear me?
Yes, and you may.
Okay, thank you. I would just add one additional note, and it's to Ms. Lexloy's comment about the carryover from the PDI, and to just give a little bit of background for the size limitations that were included within our PDI zone. Some of that comes from Metro Title IV requirements. So in the early 2000s, Metro was working with cities throughout the region and with developers to ensure there was preservation of industrial land. A lot of industrial land was being consumed by big box retail at the time. And it was causing issues with the freight network system, and then with the availability of industrial land, particularly large parcels of industrial land. And so it was requiring additional urban growth boundary amendments, adding land, and oftentimes that land, as you know, might be highly parcelized, may not be as good for the type of industrial land that we were planning for in other areas. And so with Title IV, there were restrictions put on the size of retail and service commercial, which serves daily customers and is often very, it's commercially driven and impacts the freight network with a lot more personal vehicles essentially traveling, which would be more trips. And so that's where those limitations actually come from. The majority of the industrial land within the city of Wilsonville is Title IV, and this area is also mapped on the Title IV map. And so there are certain restrictions that carry over from Metro's Title IV requirements, and that's where this one came from. This is an area, given the uniqueness of this area, that if we wanted to attempt to amend the Title IV map with Metro, we could, but also because they're highly parcelized and are probably only going to have small scale buildings anyway, I think probably this small scale retail and service commercial probably still fits with the character of this zone, at least in Basalt Creek.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that, Miranda, thank you. Okay, one last thing. Given the list, would it be easier just to specify the prohibited uses instead of listing all of the potential uses?
I think that's a consistency thing across zones. It makes sense because usually people are coming to see what they can put there, not what they can't.
Sure. Okay, just asking.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for the question.
Commissioner Carr?
So I've got a couple on the purpose statement, and I'm looking at this not only in the context of what its current application would be, but for other applications throughout the city. So the last part of the purpose statement, which I like, I think it's well written. The part that concerns me when we take it out of this context and apply it citywide is the last sentence. It may also include limited residential and commercial uses that serve as a transition to and support more intense urban industrial areas nearby. Does that limit it to now we can only apply it where there's other large industrial areas nearby? Because I understand the context of what we're trying to do with this current application. To the north, we've got residential. To the east, we've got the larger industrial sections. And this really seems to fit that purpose statement to a T. But if we pick that up and move it to another part of the city, are we, in essence, negating the purpose statement? Or is that why we said it may also include?
Yeah. And
if we say also include, do we even need that sentence at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Appreciate that question, Commissioner Carr. Cindy, did you have?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think that it's a valid point to explore. I think, need to do some more thinking through where potentially it could apply, not that it will, but just think through that. And it may be just making that statement more generic so it can apply kind of generally to transition between areas.
Yeah. Okay.
Rather than being specific to this context.
Sure. I like the
while still being applicable to this context.
I like the concept of a transition area. I think that's a great one. On the professional services bullet, are we really thinking that we would want a 4-story building? Because we've got, in the current context, no, I don't think anybody would build a 4-story tall building on any of the lots that are in this current application. But do we really want to allow a 4-story building right next to residential? Because again, we're asking this to be transitional. So we've got large urban industrial segment, this transition period, and then we've got residential. Do we really want a 4-story building? Because none of the examples that have been given were 4 stories. The highest was a 3-story.
I think these examples are more about the aesthetic necessarily than the height and the purpose. So I know, so a couple of thoughts. I think we see the point that, from this specific context and a transition, having a large building over like a private rear yard or something like that is awkward. And that there may be height limit for that. But on the other hand, if you truly are having kind of a mixed use and you're adding residential uses above a business, having the flexibility to add additional units to provide more housing may be something that's flexible. So I think let's make a note for that maybe one to think through more and see if, have we thought, I don't recall any discussions about height limitations or whether it'd be an issue here. I think a lot of the thought has been, I don't think there's going to be a great market demand to go very high here.
Commissioner Carr, where were you getting the 4-story? Because how I'm reading the bullet, it's 5,000 square feet of floor area in a single building or 20,000 feet of combined floor area within a multi-building development.
Ew.
Yeah.
Not combined floor.
Okay.
It's a that's.
So that would be 4 buildings could have no
Yeah,
more
you're
than
right.
If you had a
20,000
couple
square
buildings
feet.
on the site, they
That-
couldn't have
Yeah.
more than combined 20,000.
Multi-building development. Okay, no, you're right. I see that.
Commissioner Carr, I would note, I think this is a good conversation regardless of maybe the point you were trying to make it toward, because at a certain point we'll be looking at code and thinking about what we allow and what we don't allow, and currently we don't have a height limitation in our PDI, and so we haven't discussed necessarily what it would be for the craft industrial. I do think that we talked about during the concept plan, and we can go back and double check this, but things like the high tech was up to 5 stories. It is possible that we may have discussed building height for the craft industrial, and we can pull that forward. In terms of just building economics and development, that's something we'll also want to keep into consideration, because as Dan mentioned, when you start thinking about mixed-use buildings, it can be very challenging for a developer to build a mixed-use building at 3 stories. And often those do get pushed to 4 stories just for building economics. So I think it's a great discussion point. I don't know that it's one we need to have tonight, but I do welcome input from the commission on that, because we will be considering building height as we move into drafting the code.
Yeah, and I might add too, I'm pretty sure that during concept planning, the discussion was like with a 2 to 3 story building in craft industrial.
Do we have other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Skoll.
I'm hung up on the residential a little bit. This is a craft industrial, kind of an industrial commercial area and everything, and we plop in limited residential. Shouldn't there be some type of definition of what that limited residential should be?
Yeah, so, you want me to
Or
start?
could be, or, put some parameters around that?
So I think that the residential would be limited to those business integrated or live work dwelling units.
Yeah,
So
we
they would
defined
have that
those.
component of, there would be a residential component, but that would only be as part of a commercial use or an industrial use of some type of an industry.
Yeah.
And the idea there too was that, there's all of that existing residential there that, maybe the individuals who are living there right now would like to add some type of a craft industry to their home, whether that's in a shop or whatever. But then that eventually that would transition into more like an business integrated unit. But the need to acknowledge that there is residential there and there's residential nearby. And so the desire to continue to allow that in some way within the craft industrial.
So I think thank you for that point, Cindy. I think something that we may need to explore more is what happens to these existing homes that otherwise may not be allowed in the zone, when they're brought into the zone because someone wants to put, a small business on their property. So, because certainly from like going forward, we're talking about kind of those types of live work and having a living space integrated into your business, that sort of thing, when we get like down the road. But in the interim, if you want to like develop half of your site and keep a house on half of your site, whether that kind of detached home is a grandfathered use, this legal conforming, or if it's an outright allowed use, I don't know that we've fully thought through and answered that question. So that's a valid point for us to
I could see the
explore.
grandfathering in, for an existing property, but then for someone moving in that wants to develop a property, I would assume that they would assume that they could do the same thing as the existing landowners.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't think we want to like have one of these, especially like the 8-acre property, come in and subdivide into four detached homes.
Yeah.
Right. So
a house with a craft business, in 4, 5, 8 segments or whatever.
yeah, I think we can look at making that crisper as we refine the code. So thank you for that point.
So to add on to that, do the key definitions in the other portion of the Wilsonville Code for the business integrated dwelling units, do those roll into this classification, or do they have to be specifically mentioned?
I'll tell you what, I had this in mind when I wrote them for the Frog Pond Code. So that they may be definitions. We wrote those definitions knowing we'd probably want to use them in craft industrial and potentially other zones down the road.
So do you have to specifically name these other business integrated, home business, home occupation, live, work dwelling units in this CI zone, or?
Yeah, they'd be listed as
They would be.
permitted uses, yeah.
Okay.
We wouldn't just say residential is permitted, we'd say
These
these
types.
uses associated with any of the like industrial commercial uses that are allowed in the zone.
Got it, okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, not seeing any. I had a couple kind of observations or just clarity questions. So for the purpose statement, I really like the way it's written. And then to the question of, does it reflect the intent of the concept plan? So when I was reading the paragraph about craft industrial and the Basalt Creek plan, it seemed like there was more of an emphasis on, it's a small scale commercial that may include live work units versus in the current purpose statement, it says, it's emphasis on industrial and creative enterprise that may include residential or commercial. So I just kind of felt like, was the emphasis in the Basalt Creek plan more on commercial originally, and that's kind of morphed into something a little different? And I'm okay with that. I just to that question, I was like, oh yeah, it seems like the emphasis is a little different. And so I wondered with the master plan then, were they wanting more like customer, just commercial kind of development? So did I interpret that correctly?
Your point's understood. I don't really have any information to share tonight about that, I think. Do you have thoughts, Cindy?
Well, I know in the concept plan, when the analysis of like development types, the assumption that there would be, I think it's 6 residential units.
Yes.
In this area. And that, there also would be, so very limited residential use in the area. But I get what you're saying about that and how, we may need to look a bit more at that particular statement in the purpose to, also address Commissioner Scull's question about the residential use and be more specific about what that really means. Because we don't want additional residential coming into that area, which could happen related just because of its proximity to other residential development in Tualatin. So.
I'd be happy to jump in again.
Yeah, go for it.
Chair Hendricks, commissioners. I was the one involved with the Basalt Creek concept plan, and I believe I'm the one who actually coined kind of the land use type of craft industrial. So, and at the time, we actually didn't have other examples the way that Ms. Lexway has found in other places that actually have adopted this type of code. Some of it's actually been more recent, probably wasn't even adopted at the time that we were discussing this as part of the concept plan. I think, I would say this is consistent. I think it is a good question for us to ruminate on a little bit more as a project team to make sure. What was envisioned was, I think, because a lot of the industrial types that were being used as examples. So we were working with a consultant that was looking at, like, let's take development typologies to run performance, like metrics, what we think the outcomes and the performance indicators will be for this area in terms of jobs and trips and other things. And so we were saying, okay, well, if we want the high tech to look like XYZ, here's some buildings in Wilsonville that represent that, and what are their performance metrics, and then we can kind of plop those into this area and run those. The majority of what we were running was manufacturing, warehouse, light industrial, and then some office space. And then certain uses had more or less office space depending upon how much they typically take up. And in this area, we were kind of looking at, it really wouldn't kind of function in the same way. Mm-hmm. And we were looking at other building types outside of the city of Wilsonville to get an idea, because this really wasn't a land use that we currently had. I think it was just this acknowledgement of, we're going to have these really small sites. We're going to have much like smaller scale development. When we look around the region or even outside of the region to a place like Hood River, do they have something that represents this? We kind of saw these building types that would fit that. And they did have more commercial, because often what you're seeing is like a craft. It could be somebody who's roasting their own coffee, or somebody who's making beer, mm-hmm. or somebody who's has a photography studio, or doing ceramics, kind of these different like kind of craft, somebody who does leather work. And then they have like a shop, because that's the way that they're selling their product. They might have an Etsy shop too, but oftentimes there's a retail space that goes alongside it. And so I think we were trying to kind of recognize that and maybe use the term primarily commercial, but I'm not sure that we really, I know we didn't really see it as like primarily retail, like it's going to be a retail strip or anything like that. It was much more that there's going to be this enterprise component to it, which is I think why you see that word pop up now in the purpose statement, but also would be more commercial than our kind of heavier industrial type uses. Not heavy industry, but you know what I mean, like more traditional, large industry.
Okay. Yeah, I think that helps. I think, because I'm almost looking at the purpose statement also like a vision too. And so when I'm trying to imagine, like you explaining, it's not just retail, but then I look at like Hood River and I do feel you want people walking down. So I'm trying to imagine for this area, this craft industrial area, are we wanting people, is that a destination we're trying to get people to? Because Hood River has the waterfront and Southeast Portland has a lot higher density over there if we're limiting residential. So like if we want those small craft, businesses to be successful over there, how are we going to make sure, that's incorporated into the purpose statement? And I don't know, I guess I just didn't quite grasp that. I think there's that question mark. But I do like the direction it's heading. I'm just not sure what I'd suggest in terms of language to help kind of build that visual. So anyways.
Those are great questions, and I think that's worth exploring a little bit more, because I'm not sure we saw it as like a destination, like the way Hood River's waterfront is a destination. Okay. So I think this is a great I think it was more of, we could see these things kind of naturally occurring. There's already, I mean, one example is one of the properties has he's a carpenter, and so he's running a business on site as well as his home. And so it was kind of like recognizing that kind of a thing already happening too, and just how would this place maybe morph over time, seeing it as an area that's not going to be the first to develop and not to develop with like these larger industrial uses, the way that like the flat vacant parcels on Green Hill Lane will. And so these are great questions, and I would love to hear more from the commission in terms of their thoughts related to this conversation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the picture of Hood River's like kind of stuck with me, because then I even saw, I hate to ask, but I saw like a food cart in one of the pictures. I was like, is that something that would be a potential use or not? Or I don't know if that applies. I don't know how that works, but does that need to be listed if that's something that we're interested in? I didn't see that in the list, so it's something to think about. So food carts might be another conversation at some point, but not now.
You know, from when Commissioner Haberline brought that up about integrating retail food service and all that into the area, that's the first thing that came to mind was the food carts. Everybody talks about the food carts, and is that something that would be apropos for this, craft zone?
Yeah, which after hearing, kind of more explanation around the vision, like I'm not sure that is necessarily what was kind of intended for this.
No, but
Commissioner Willard.
But it could be people preparing food for their food truck that they take out elsewhere.
Right.
And so the food truck could be a very real component of the business, but maybe not it won't sell food out of it.
Right, because some food manufacturing now is just that. They have suites of kitchens that prepare for the food trucks, and they back the trucks up and they go from there. And lunch trucks and all kinds of stuff like that. So that could be the artisan food or the beverage production, whatever that, it falls into that category.
Yep.
But, the question is can they pull out in the parking lot and, get in a circle and say, come on over, for the others that are working in the area.
The pod situation. Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
You guys are just hitting it out of the park. Thank you, commissioners.
Yeah, no problem. Commissioner Willard, did you? Oh, you're just turning off the mic. Got it. Okay. I'll go ahead and move us along. So we have time to do public comments. I'm going to move on to that section, even though I don't see, anybody. This is a process question for staff. If I don't see anybody in the room, and maybe I can check and ask, do I have to read the whole public comment spiel?
And we've confirmed no one's in the building. I don't see anyone
There's no one
out in the
in the
hall.
audience.
There's no one on Zoom besides Ms. Bateshell. I think we can proceed without it.
Okay.
Because
Hopefully-
the public comments aren't even required for work session.
Right,
Yeah, so it's just at your prerogative.
So
If you
I
don't want to
will-
allow people to talk that don't exist, then that is great.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. So I'm just going to skip that part then, because I don't see anybody, and I have confirmation that no one's online. So that skips multiple pages of the script. Let's see. So I think that is, I think we've discussed it enough. We don't have any additional feedback for staff, so that would be the end of this work session. I think they did. Yeah.
Thank you for your feedback this evening, commissioners.
I was curious whether Commissioner Semenova, do you have any comment?
I love listening to all of your minds like running through this, and I'm actually learning a lot from the questions y'all are asking. But this definitely has grown. I mean, thank you for presenting some examples of what that really meant. That was helpful. Yeah.
Great.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your input.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to our next work session for the CFEC parking, the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Parking Project. This is a chance for us to gain additional understanding of and provide guidance on ongoing legislative projects prior to a public hearing. At this time, I'll go ahead and ask the city team to give a presentation. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for that.
I was going to go with the Jeopardy music. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the awkward silence as I opened up the PowerPoint. If I don't do that, then I forget to open the PowerPoint as I start talking. You've seen me do that too. So again, for the record, Dan Polly, the city's planning manager. And in our previous work sessions on this project, the CFEC Parking Compliance and Standards Reform Project, we covered the project's purpose, the scope, and review draft code revisions. So tonight, we're here to follow up on one remaining item from our last work session that required further assessment, and that is the design review standards. So to understand the various compliance paths from the CFEC program for parking lot design standards, it's essential to first understand the basics of Wilsonville's longstanding parking lot standards, which include screening, a certain amount of landscaping, parking space to tree ratio, on-site pedestrian path requirements, and drive aisle design. Additionally, it's important to note that the city has a single set of standards for most parking lots, with enhanced standards for larger parking areas exceeding 200 spaces. For these large parking areas, the enhanced standards include wider landscaped areas, particularly along the edges of streets, increased tree requirements, so more trees relative to the number of parking spaces, and tree-like features including sidewalks and planting strips for primary drive aisles. So let's discuss the basics of the existing city parking lot design standards and their alignment with the new CFEC rules. So the threshold, a key part is that the threshold for enhanced design requirements is significantly lower in the CFEC rules than compared to the current city code, approximately 40 spaces rather than 200 spaces in the current code. To understand the compliance, we can divide the conversation to 3 tiers based on the size of parking areas. The first or lowest tier is less than 40 spaces. The middle tier is 40 to 200 spaces, and the highest tier is more than 200 spaces. So in terms of how these different tiers, how these different tiers comply with the CFEC rules, the existing standards comply with CFEC for the lowest tier, which is the less than 40 spaces, and the highest tier, the more than 200 spaces, which already have, again, those higher ones already have enhanced design requirements, particularly a higher number of trees per space. The primary discussion then focuses on achieving compliance for this middle tier of 40 to 200 spaces. So to provide context, let's look at nearby examples representing the range of parking areas under discussion. The example of a 40-space parking area. This can be seen as the closest portion of the City Hall parking lot up to the first drive aisle cut through. And then a large parking area, an example is the parking area in front of Goodwill and adjacent businesses north of Safeway. The focus of our code compliance edits then is on the middle range of parking areas which fall between these two examples. So one straightforward compliance option, which we discussed in the last work session, is to adopt all the current enhanced parking area design standards for large lots. For lots with 40 to 200 spaces, simply changing the threshold from more than 200 spaces to more than 40 spaces. The memo we shared last work session initially recommended this approach, as you know. During the Planning Commission discussion last meeting, which was a fun one, Concerns were raised that applying the enhanced requirements not mandated by CFEC to the 42,200 space parking areas could potentially use land that might be better utilized for other purposes. So in response and further analysis, and including also feedback from the city council in addition to the planning commission, the project team is proposing a three-tiered approach to design standards for parking surface areas. Under this proposal, the enhanced design standards would only apply to mid-sized lots with 42,200 spaces. Smaller lots would continue to follow the existing standards, and the 200 or more would continue to follow the existing enhanced design standards that meets CFEC. And it's also, I'll note that these thresholds only require to surface parking, not to like structured parking. So the CFEC rules include, so we'll come back and answer questions with it. I want to hit the solar real quick before we do that. So as we discussed last time, the CFEC rules include a solar option aimed at making new parking areas with 40 or more spaces more climate friendly. The baseline requirement is for all parking areas is 30% tree canopy. However, the rules allow flexibility for a final 10% or 1/4 of the total canopy requirement for these 40%, for these 4,200 spaces through a couple alternative compliance options. One approach is to require 40% of tree canopy for parking spaces for that middle tier of parking spaces, which aligns with the city's current enhanced design standards for large lots. Alternatively, the city could allow a 30% tree canopy supplemented by solar panels that generate specific amount of energy per parking space as outlined in the CFEC rules. So based on our discussion last work session, as well as input from the city council, the project team has drafted standards to implement this optional solar panel pathway to allow them to do either or at their discretion. And that has been in your packet. So we'll move on to the questions that I have for you this evening. So here are a few questions. First of all, I'd like to hear, does the commission support the proposed three-tier approach that we talked about? Second, are there any additional thoughts or feedback on the parking design standards, especially related to tree canopy? And finally, do the updated draft amendments accurately reflect our discussion last time about allowing solar panels as a substitute for a portion of the required tree canopy? In addition to all that, happy to take any other input or direction the commission would like to provide on these draft amendments ahead of a public hearing next month. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Who wants to start with thoughts or questions?
Is there only one?
No.
Brian.
Commissioner Eberline, thank you.
Fine, I'll go first. Okay, yes, I support three-tier parking area design standards. No additional feedback regarding tree canopy. I think the language makes sense. And I think the amendments around the allowance of solar make sense. Maybe it might be a little wordy and maybe a little bit confusing in terms of the calculations on 40 spaces minus 4.4%.
That's a simplified version.
Cool. Okay, great. Well done. Yeah, that one.
Brian, our consultant, said it's the cleanest, most readable version he's seen. So it's a complicated set of rules, as you discovered when we talked about it last month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if that's as good as it's going to get, then we'll go for it.
I'll try, but it's complicated.
Yeah, okay. And then the only other question that I had or comment was in section 4A for internal pedestrian walkways. The last bullet, walkways shall be designed to channel pedestrians to the front entrance of the building. Should that be main entrance instead of front entrance? And it may come down to the semantics around definition of what the front entrance is, because I know in some places the main street is the front entrance, but the parking is not at the main street, it's in the back, and that ends up being the area where everybody comes into.
Yeah.
Where, like, the Fred Meyer businesses around there, they all have, I think, the main entrances around that are street frontage, but none of them are
Front
used.
entrances are boarded up.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, City Hall is the same way. We've
Yeah.
got a front entrance that isn't used, so I just wonder if that would be better
Yeah.
suited as main entrance.
Yeah, that's existing language, but I think it's a valid point. I also think it'd be wise to make it consistent with the ADA parking, with language in the ADA code.
Okay.
Where you're putting the ADA spaces closest to whatever entrance, I think it says main entrance.
Yeah,
So we
Okay.
should probably mirror that language. We'll make that edit.
awesome, thank you, that's it.
Great. Thanks. Commissioner Carr?
All right, now I'm going to sound like Ron for a couple minutes. Yeah, no. So 2EI, what's the purpose of, for parking areas, 40 spaces or larger, at least 25% of the required trees shall be planted in the interior of the parking area? Why are we making, I mean, I understand the concept of we want trees planted in and amongst the parking area. But why are we, it seems like the more specific we are, the more difficult it's going to be to adhere
Yeah.
to.
And that's either existing code or CFAC rules. So I'm trying to remember which one.
Okay.
I think it may be CFAC rules, but I can verify that.
All right.
And I'll follow up maybe via email. You don't want me to bring the code up again, so, on the screen. So I'll probably need to follow that up separately to kind of run that down, why it's that way. It's
Okay.
not something new we drafted. It's either comes from the rules or the current code.
Okay, on the 4B, so I am in favor of the 3-tier parking. So we've got less than 40, 40 to 200, and then 200 plus. On 4B, we're not specifying parking, we're specifying acreage. Is that our intent? It says street-like features along drive aisles, parking lots more than 3 acres. So is more than 3 acres fit into the 40 to 200, or can you get a I mean, we've been talking about parking lots, and all of a sudden you throw acreage at me. What, I don't know, I can't translate that in my head.
Yeah, so for the most part, we try, because the rules in the current code do not align there. One talks about spaces, one talks about acreage. And we discussed which one to go with. We went with parking spaces. And it can vary, right? 200 spot Costco parking lot's bigger than a 200-foot, like Wilsonville High School parking lot, right?
Sure.
So in this case, this is existing code language that is, especially going forward, is probably going to be used fairly often. And I don't have good rationale to change. I think it was because where most of our code talked about spaces before as well, this is like the one, in the existing code, this is like the one standard that goes with acreage. And I read that to be intentional, that really they wanted it because of, regardless of the number of spaces, if you have a certain land area dedicated to parking, is going to dominate more and kind of be more expansive.
Okay.
So that's where like that requirement of the street-like features come in, is to kind of break up that large expanse. So there's kind of 2 points why I would recommend that we keep it as it is. First of all, there's a direct nexus to the requirement to acreage rather than number of spaces. And also, just the fact that if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's, that, for some reason, that choice was made in the code is not an obvious error or typo, so I would defer to what's right.
Okay. And then 4C, all parking lots viewed from the public right-of-way shall have a minimum 12-foot landscape buffer extended from the edge of the property line at the right-of-way to the edge of the parking lot. So can the canopy be planted in there? What's planted in there, would that count towards the canopy?
Only if the portion that overhangs the parking lot.
Okay.
So if you have otherwise it's probably going to be your street tree if it's on one side of that 12-foot space. If it's on the interior side, then it's probably going to overhang your parking lot and help you with your coverage requirements. If it's smack dab in the middle, it may just be a pretty tree.
It might just be a pretty tree.
That also has stormwater benefits, et cetera.
Yeah, right.
Pretty and
It's
useful
important, pretty important.
It's still important, it just doesn't count. Where did I find that? In the solar panel. There was something in this about solar panels. Where did I see that? Now I need the music.
Do you want me to
Are you
ask
looking at
and come back?
2D?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll look for what my question is. Yeah, I'll come back.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Sure, go for it.
Regarding the trees, is there any specific trees? Because there's all kinds of different types of trees, and it talks about canopy and everything. So is there a category of trees that can be used, or do we really want to go that deep?
So we don't want to specify tree type in the development code, just because we did that. I mean, you look at our landscape code that had that specified in the early 2000s, and it's just woefully wrong now, 20 some odd years later, because we learn new things about different species and cultivars that, we don't want to use those anymore. Ron's shaking his head from the street trees in his neighborhood. So for that reason, we don't want to put it there. And also, it is more a performance type thing, right? Any tree that's going to provide canopy and be able to be pruned to be able to provide the clearance, that's really what we're looking for. Rather than, other than that, leave it to the landscape architects to really decide, color, foliage, and other components of it.
Okay. Well, other than that, I'm good with the 3-tier standard.
Commissioner Willard?
I'm fine with the 3-tier. I think it's a good way to go. Don't have any additional feedback regarding tree canopy. The only thing about the allowance of solar is this is a nit. So if you're the professional, you can take it if you like it. But I feel like if the solar is put in the parking lot, that makes sense to do it in lieu of. If it's on the roof, it doesn't feel like it makes sense to do it in lieu. But
yeah, I think part of the discussion we had last time, I see both sides of that. It makes sense in the parking lot, but there's also, you still have 30% tree canopy required in the parking lot. So
yeah,
it may be more functional to put it on the roof and provides the same, climate benefits 20 feet away as it does sitting in the, under a tree in the parking lot. Probably more climate benefit on a roof than sitting under a tree in a parking lot.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's all the input I had.
Commissioner Carr? Nice.
So in 2DI, it says for each 0.5 kilowatt of generation capacity of an on-site solar panel, one parking space may be exempted from the calculation of the ratio in A. So is 0.5 kilowatt a standard generation, or is this, I mean, how did we come up with 0.5 kilowatt? Is that industry standard?
Nope, it's what the state rules says, and we're
Oh, it's
looking to comply with the state rules.
Okay.
That's the simple answer. Where they got it from, I don't know.
They just made it up, yeah.
It's a nice round number for us, as far as I know, but.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner
No questions,
Semenova.
but no, I appreciate you taking our feedback and to make it in 3-tier.
I appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate you suffering through that portion of the presentation last time.
The amount of brain power, I feel like, for the solar percentage. Yes.
We really want to make it work. No, I don't have any additional feedback. This looks good. Thank you.
Did you have a thought, Commissioner Heberlein? I can see it in your eyes.
Come on, Ron.
Okay, yeah, fine, I'll do it. Okay, so Dan, the only thing I was thinking about in terms of the solar, the one thing that the trees are there for is to help, I mean, yeah, so reduce the heat island as a result of generating shade. So if you're putting solar in, you're gonna have to put it in tall enough to meet parking clearance requirements anyway. So it's going to be generally high up, and it will generate, I'll call it an equivalent magnitude of shade that the tree would have been doing. So there is, I can see some benefit. Now, there is also the potential drawback of the trees. If you site the solar panels too close to the other trees, then you'll lose the effectiveness of the solar panels. And so maybe there's something to be considered in terms of ensuring that the solar panels are sited such that they aren't shaded by the other trees. But.
Well, again, it's on site, it's not in the parking lot. I don't think smart designers are going to necessarily put them in the parking lot. They'll probably be on the roof of the building or somewhere else on the site. And again, from a climate benefit standpoint, a location that would probably be more efficient and more. And
I don't know if I agree though, because if you go to California or Arizona, you see parking lots that will have a row of parking stalls with solar panels across the entire section. And then you could still have trees along other stalls that would not be shading the solar panels there.
And sure, and particularly if you think of this, because this would apply to multifamily, if you had a row of covered parking and they put solar panels on that.
Yeah.
That's probably it'd be, you're not going to have like, you know, a tree-like structure that has little solar panel leaves on it, right? Sticking in the middle of the parking lot. It's probably either going to be on a roof or on like a full row covered parking from a practical standpoint. So, and you're not going to be putting trees in that same location. I don't think you're trying to sneak this little solar panel between these two trees or something.
So if you look in Arizona, for instance, they have trees that kind of run around the parking lot, and then the center of the parking lot is covered parking, and then there's the solar panels on the covered parking. So you don't see trees, many trees kind of scattered throughout the body of the parking lot. You see the trees around the edge. And then, because you've got 15 parking spots covered with solar panels on them. So there's nowhere to put a tree. I can't put a tree every 8th because.
Because remember, it's an aggregate amount. It doesn't necessarily have to be every 8th.
I understand that. But then you're also telling me I can't plant the trees on the edge because then they won't count towards the canopy.
Well, you can, the interior of the edge you can.
So now I have to worry about the roots of the tree damaging the parking.
So, and the 25%, again, I'll need to follow up whether that actually came from CFAC or the rules or not.
I guess the question is, do we want to encourage solar? Because if we're making
it in the parking area,
in a parking area
on the roof.
Yeah. If we're making it so complicated to figure out if I can make a solar panel system work, they may not do it. They may say, well, it's easy to plant a tree, right? That's easy. If you're making me run through a master's degree in in solar panel construction, I may just say bag it, right? But are we trying to encourage it, then we should make it easier for them, as easy as possible for them to do, to adhere to the standards.
Yeah.
Commissioner Simonova, did you have a thought that you wanted to share?
I did, because I was thinking like about the comment about, keeping the parking lot cooler, right, what you were saying. But and it is kind of funny that the canopy has to be over the parking lot, yet the solar panels can be up on the roof, because the point of it is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right? And the canopy is going to reduce that, whether it's over the parking lot or not, or in another green space. Like, I think it's about the size or maybe of the canopy. And,
Yeah, and really they are separate because you do have that 30% base canopy regardless.
yeah.
So it's not like if you do, you can't get rid of all your canopy by doing solar.
Right.
It's just a quarter of it. And
But it should count whether it's over the parking lot or not. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
is that because and having to install like solar panels may be cost prohibitive or something for the project if they have to run everything into the parking lot, to
Yeah, good point.
to charge, batteries or transport it back or transmit it back.
And I think because separate, as is in the code, I mean, part of this is also that where you're wiring 40% of the parking spaces for EV, that generally you'll probably also have, a lot of the EV charging stations will have a panel on top. So you'll have to design it where the trees and the EV charging stations aren't in the same space as well if you have solar panels, just like a little solar panel on top of that.
Okay, I'm not, not seeing other thoughts or questions. I am supportive of the 3-tier, and I don't have any additional feedback on the tree canopy, ... and then the solar conversation. I'm like, I guess, do you have general, what you need generally?
Yeah, I feel like I
Okay.
have what I need. There's a couple of questions I'll follow up on via email, so.
Okay.
But thank you for your feedback and for wading through the solar panel and stuff, yeah. It's, we did one thing that I really pushed to do and, worked with our consultant, Brian, and the state, is to be able to not have to speak two different languages essentially during the solar panels, because it's like where you're talking about the number of parking spaces as well as like percent of tree canopy. So anyway, try to simplify it where we can. I hope, I'll look at it again to see if I have any other bright ideas of how to simplify it, but effort was made to simplify.
Thank you, yeah. No, it's definitely a complex, I feel like you're going in the right direction.
And I don't get to choose how complex it is.
Right, yeah. Working with what you got. Okay. Is any further discussion, or can we move along? Okay, I'm seeing head nods, so that is the end of our work session for this item. And then we just have next on the agenda is the informational pieces, the city council action minutes, and our work program. I only had 2 things, and then I see Commissioner Willard too. I just wanted to let you guys know that I will be at a conference in July, so I will not be here, and I will also email the city team and let you all know. So maybe
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah, Vice Chair. And then I just wanted to say thank you, because the last time we talked about maybe we could get the PowerPoints in advance, but really the compromise was just having the questions and the presentation match what's in the staff report, and it just made it easier for my mind, and I noticed it. So thank you for doing that. Commissioner Willard.
I wanted to just take a second. I'll be brief because I know it's late, but remember about 4 weeks ago, we got an invitation that said, hey, the mayor can't attend this conference. Can anybody attend? And I put my name in the hat and I was like, I'll go. So I wanted to give you guys a pass down because it was fascinating. So first off, it was the West Side Economic Alliance. And so it was all the West Side communities, and it was all about economic development. And so the opening speaker was Mayor Beach Pace from Hillsborough. And she talked about how much housing that they've been putting in there. And it's mind-boggling when you compare it to Little Hillsborough. You know, the housing numbers that they're trying to hit are magnitudes larger than Wilsonville. So that was interesting context. But really, it was all about industrial lands. And so she made a very strong case that there is an industrial land crisis in Oregon and in the metro area and on the west side. She talked a lot about various developments that have stalled, frustratingly. And so there was just a general sentiment after her discussion and then during and beyond that the entire region and state have benefited from Hillsborough's aggressive growth and their posture. And now the city of Hillsborough is out of urban growth reserve. And so there's a little bit of a uh-oh moment. What does this mean for the states? There was some really good discussion on some things that we can do to encourage it, but there was the Echo Northwest came in. They had a panel, 2 gentlemen came in, and they gave their economic update report, their regional economic update, and the general sentiment there was how much the region needs economic development, how if we don't connect those economic developments as vital, that it could result in us having to reduce services for people that need it most. And so it was a very interesting connection to social services about why we need economic development and jobs. They gave tons of data around different counties and movement between counties, and they compared the metro area, Multnomah County in particular, to Clark County over in Washington. Very different numbers because of economic development. And so it really opened my eyes to economic development. So the last thing that I wanted to describe, I think, is there was an aspirational economy panel that was discussing several consultants, and the general sentiments there was industrial land inventory is way too low to attract development. They are having to turn down people that want to bring business to Oregon because they ask them, what's your stomach for lawsuits, for delays, for concern? You know, what is your stomach for that? Because if you can't stomach that, then you probably shouldn't build in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to hear as somebody on the planning commission. So in this context, so here they asked for regulatory relief of land use planning is what their main message was. And in this conversation, they brought up Wilsonville and Basalt Creek. And that's really what I wanted to share with you too. And so they were talking about our Basalt Creek area, part of which we've talked about tonight, as being a wonderful opportunity to invite industrial jobs into our region. But they, sympathetically were saying that the city of Wilsonville staff is unable to maximize the opportunity because they're not given any funding, they're not given any relief from these mandatory items, so that way they can't go, I'll use the word bird dog, all the different tax lots and all the different owners and really put a coordinated, deliberate plan to have it develop into something big. And they were very sympathetic to Wilsonville, but they were like, this is one of our biggest opportunities we have, and we don't have resources to solve it. So I thought that obviously hit very close to home. So my final thoughts on this, thank you for listening, has been that I loved going. I geeked out. I took pages and pages of notes. Thank you to the city for the opportunity to attend. And I put this in my conference survey, is this should be required attendance from planning commissioners, for city councilors. It was really eye-opening, and it had a lot of great conversation. So anyway,
wow,
that's that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, and I had one more item.
Yeah.
I heard in the last few weeks that one of our former planning commissioners passed away, Aaron Wood, Representative Aaron Wood.
He did.
Yeah, so I didn't know if everybody knew that, so I thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, yeah, that was, Commissioner Carr.
I just wanted to mention Chris Namatsu, who was I think his final title was Community Development Director. He retired April 30th.
That's okay.
Yes.
What?
We've mispronounced his name for 30 years.
Oh, yeah. That's all right. I don't know what his title was. But after 30 years of service, he retired. So He was a great guy. I loved working with him, so, yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know if you didn't already, so, yeah.
I love the information sharing. Thanks, everyone. That's awesome. Any informational pieces that we want to share? All right.
One thing.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for taking care of us the other night. That was a very good program, for the
volunteer
volunteers,
appreciation.
for the volunteer program. It was excellent.
I enjoyed it.
Yes.
Heard the fiddling. I ran off the track, but I hear the fiddling was
Those
great.
fiddlers fiddled hard. Yeah. They were awesome.
Be fiddling.
Yeah, they do. Thanks, that's great. Okay, we have completed all of our scheduled agenda items, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Awesome, do I have a second? Thank you, I hear a second from Commissioner Skoll. The meeting is adjourned at 8:07. Thanks.